Hello and welcome everyone to today's live event. We'll be discussing the Great Backyard Bird Count, which starts on Friday, February 13th and concludes on Monday, February 16th this year. My name is Cooper Farr, and I am the Manager of Community Science at National Audubon Society, where I help to coordinate the Great Backyard Bird Count along with other community science programs at Audubon. So the Great Backyard Bird Count, which you might also hear referred to as the GBBC, is a collaborative effort between the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Birds Canada, and National Audubon Society. Wild Birds Unlimited is a founding sponsor of the program, so thank you to them. And then we have additional support from Armstrong Bird Food and Kawa Optics in Canada, so thanks to them as well. We are excited to have project coordinators from all three partner organizations here today, along with a very special guest speaker, Dr. Julia Zarankin, who will join us in a little while to talk about the joy of birding. So I will introduce everyone in a moment, but first, just a couple of tech notes for our YouTube audience. So closed captioning is available. You can click the CC button at the bottom of the video to turn on the captions. If you have any questions, you can use the chat to ask them. My colleagues will be helping to answer some questions there. And then thank you so much to those of you who submitted questions ahead of time. We had a ton of great questions that came through in the registration form. So we will make sure to answer the common ones during the presentation. We'll also have some time at the end to address new questions or maybe address any of those questions that came in through the registration that we weren't able to answer in the presentation. But yeah, so I think we are ready to get started. So I will just have Becca and Olivia join me here. Hello. Yes, so we three are the project leaders for the Great Backyard Bird Count. Becca Radomski-Bish is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Hi, Becca. Thanks for joining.
Having us, Cooper.
And then Olivia Carvalho is with Birds Canada.
Hello, hello.
Hello, thanks for joining. Okay, so we're gonna just get right into it. So we will start out just with some basics. So Becca, I am going to turn it over to you to walk us through maybe the most basic question, which is, what is the Great Backyard Bird Count?
Great question and very important one. The Great Backyard Bird Count, or GBBC, is a 4-day global participatory science event that happens every February. And this year it runs over February 13th through 16th, which is considered President's Day weekend in the US and Family Day weekend in Canada. And it's a really fun, warm, welcoming event for people of all bird levels to get together and spend some time appreciating the birds in and around their communities and homes. We only ask that you watch and listen for birds for about 15 minutes and tell us what you hear or see during that time. For those of you that want to participate multiple times or multiple days, that's wonderful. The ask is just at least 15 minutes. And what's really fun about GBBC is birds truly are pretty much anywhere and everywhere. So whether you're waking up and having a warm cup of coffee or tea in the morning and the birds are flying to your feeders, whether you're going for a walk, running errands, whatever and whenever you see birds, we want to hear about it. And so it's a really fun event to take a moment to really appreciate and celebrate birds together.
Awesome. Thank you, Becca. Okay, I will now turn it over to Olivia to talk a little bit more about the specifics of how someone would participate in the GBBC and how they would report their bird observations or their bird data to the program.
That's great, Cooper. And I'm going to take us right to the GBBC website, which is birdcount.org, just so we can get a bit of a visual on what I'm going to walk through here. So there's two different ways that you can participate. You can submit your sightings through the Merlin Bird ID app, which is great for beginners, and we definitely recommend that if you are just sort of dipping your toes into the world of birds. You'll be able to use the identification tools that are built into Merlin, and then just make sure that you are signed into Merlin and click "This is my bird." There's a button once you found your bird on the list. Perhaps you have spotted a black-capped chickadee. Go ahead and click "That's my bird," and that will actually allow you to save your sightings and submit it to the Great Backyard Bird Count. Because Merlin doesn't actually take the number of individual birds you're seeing, just the species that are present, we want to make sure we're saving which species actually were present during our count. So if you haven't used it before, really recommend going out and trying it for even 10 to 15 minutes before the count to familiarize yourself with the tool. And just, important, because you're not capturing species. It's not a checklist of individual birds. Gotta save my bird for it to count, the GBBC. So if you scroll down, I'm on the homepage here. I'll move us to the participate page. And here you're gonna find detailed instructions, 1, 2, 3 of how to participate. So you gotta decide where you're gonna watch those birds, go out for at least 15 minutes once over the 4-day count period, which is February 13th to 16th. And then identify all the birds that you see or hear. And like I said, with Merlin, that's just gonna be the species that are present. You can also use eBird. eBird allows you to use your phone's internal GPS to quickly identify your location and then track the time and the distance that you covered during your GBBC outing. eBird allows you to submit the number of individual birds you've seen as well. So any flock or multiple of a species that are present can be captured with eBird. I'm just going to scroll down here. Farther down on the page, it talks about the ways to enter your data, and you can actually download both Merlin and eBird here, but there's detailed instructions as well on using either of those platforms. The third way to participate is to do it on paper. Take an old-fashioned checklist out with you and then submit it through the desktop or laptop web browser when you are home and back at your computer. So maybe you like a more present birding experience, paper is great. Like I said, there's step-by-step instructions under each of these tools under the Participate tab on the website. And just make sure if you are going to use Merlin or eBird out in the field to log in advance to make sure you have access to your account. So if you do need account support, we can get you sorted before the weekend so you can enjoy your birding in real time.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia, for walking us all through that. And I did just want to touch on a question that we have actually seen a lot, which is whether you need to have a smartphone or a computer to participate in the count. And what I'll say is that we do require that the data be entered, into or via one of the tools that Olivia just mentioned and walked everyone through. But if you are someone who doesn't have access to the internet, doesn't have a phone, doesn't have a computer, maybe just doesn't want to interact with that technology, you do have some other options. So you might try reaching out to friends or family to help submit the data for you. Basically, as long as you provide them the location where you are counting your birds, the list of birds and numbers, the times that you counted, someone else can enter that information for you and you can still participate in the count. If you are located within the United States, there are many Audubon chapters that actually have volunteers who may be able to help you enter your birds. And if not, if you're somewhere else or if there isn't an Audubon chapter near you, there are often, birding clubs or other organizations with people who would be really excited to help you out with this. So you don't have to. There are other ways to get involved if you really don't want to use that technology. Okay, so I will now turn it back over to Becca to talk about which birds we should actually count. So we get some questions about this where people are just wondering, should I count flyovers, like birds that I see flying overhead? Can I count a bird that I just hear but I don't see? Should I count non-native species in my area? So yeah, Becca, take it away and tell us, what people should count.
Yes, absolutely. Share it all. Whatever you hear, whatever you see, big, small, we want to know all about it. If you just hear a bird and you really don't know how many there are, for example, maybe you don't actually see the bird, you can just report one. just do an estimate. And we do recognize, like geese in particular or large flocks, it's always an estimate, and that is absolutely fine. The scientists know how to work with that data when we give our estimate numbers, but try your best to get as accurate as possible if you're using eBird and actually reporting numbers. And as Olivia said, when you're using Merlin, you don't actually tell us how many, you just tell us that you actually heard or saw a bird on that particular day in that particular location. So you don't have to worry about counting them in that situation. And then absolutely, even our non-native birds in all the various places that they now find themselves, we want to know about them. It's really important to understand how bird populations are changing, their status and trends, where they're showing up. Sometimes you even get surprise sightings over GBBC and you see a bird that's never been reported in your area before. So we want to have all that information. It makes it a really fun and interesting event. And the most important thing is just to make sure that you're submitting new checklists or observations for each time that you're actually doing your active bird watching. So maybe you'll start in the morning, you'll take a break, have your breakfast, walk away. If you come back and do some more birding, just make sure you start and stop those times, especially as it relates to your eBird checklist, so we know exactly when those birds were seen. And you can do this at multiple locations. You don't have to stay in one place for the GBBC, and that's one of the fun things about this. There are literally birds almost everywhere, so share as much as you want to over those 4 days, and we'd love to have that as a part of our data set.
Wonderful. Thank you, Becca. Okay, Olivia, I will turn it back over to you to talk about birds at feeders. So specifically, how should we count birds at feeders? I know you are a leader for Project Feeder Watch, which is a project that maybe some of our audience might be familiar with. So could you talk about maybe how these two programs are a little bit different?
Yes, absolutely. And if you are a Project Feeder Watcher, hello, we meet again. So the counting protocol is a little bit different between Feeder Watch and the Great Backyard Bird Count. Similar in that you're submitting the highest number of individual species seen at one time during your observation period. And this is, we're thinking about stationary counting here. So if I'm sitting at my back window looking at the feeder in my yard, I'm only counting the birds, the highest number of birds present at that time. So if I've got 6 chickadees and then they leave and 2 more come, still 6 is my count. I'm taking the highest number seen at one time. Where Project Feeder Watch and the Great Backyard Bird Count differ is for GBBC, if you say see a female cardinal and it leaves, and 5 minutes later a male comes, you can count those as 2 different observations because they are quite obviously not the same bird. People get hung up on that with Feeder Watch, and I'm happy to tell you can count them separately for GBBC. You can also GBBC birds that fly overhead that you are able to identify. So if you've got a lovely V of geese that passes over your yard and you can quite easily count them, please submit those as well. You can also submit the number of birds that you hear, not just see. So they don't have to be visually present as long as you are able to identify them auditorily. You can count those for the Great Backyard Bird Count, and that's where they differ.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we'll wrap up our discussion of the basics of the GBBC with a question that I have heard a lot. So I'll turn this one back over to you, Becca. Can you tell us whether folks who are new to birding, folks who are still learning their birds, maybe not super sure about their bird ID skills, can they contribute to the Great Backyard Bird Count?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the reasons we love GBBC. It's a really warm and welcoming event. And for those of you that are new on your journey, you are in good company. We all love birds and we all love to share in that joy. So thank you for joining us. And we have lots of fun tools to help those people who feel like maybe they could use a little extra support in learning birds. I'm going to screen share here real quick for you all. Again, we're at the birdcount.org website, and this particular page can be found under Help. And there's several tools that are listed here that can help people with bird identification. One of which is one of the tools you will use to submit data, which is Merlin. And Merlin is a really user-friendly tool. You can either record bird sounds or you can walk through a couple of questions and get fed birds that are found in your area. This is a great tool for learning birds. And if you push, as Olivia said, the green button that said, "This is my bird," and save it to Merlin, that counts as contributing. Audubon also has a wonderful bird guide app. So you can use this as well when you're out on walks, helping, or at home, helping to idea your scene. And then there are 2 guides online for those. There are 2 databases that are quite lovely and have lots of images and ideas for how to help identify birds. The Audubon Bird Guide for North American birds, and then All About Birds also has a great resource there. So those will be really helpful tools for those that are newer to their bird's journey and trying to get better at identification. Another really wonderful possibility for folks that maybe you appreciate going birding with other people, right? Maybe being in company with folks that may know more birds than you is something that would be interesting for GBBC. We have a map here that you can, those of you who maybe are organizing events, you can also use this and add your events to the map. But you can zoom in on this map wherever you are in the world, and it is really fun to see actually how many events are going on. I'm going to zoom in here. And you can see that perhaps there's even an event where you are living. And this continues to get updated right up to GBBC weekend. So if you go on today and you don't see an event in your area, but you really want to join one, make sure to check back because people are continuing to upload their events. And birding with other people is one of the fun ways to actually learn new tricks and skills and get a better understanding of birds in your region. So don't be afraid to join a count if that is of interest to anybody.
Thanks, Becca. Yeah, when I was learning my birds, all I wanted to do was go out and bird with other people who knew more than me because I always got good tips and I learned things from them about, how to differentiate species and how to identify different birds. So that's a really great tip. Okay, thank you both so much for that kind of crash course in the basics of the GBBC. I did want to just have a fun reminder that we are giving away a pair of Zeiss binoculars to one randomly selected participant who submits one or more sightings to Merlin or a 15-minute count to eBird over the 4 days of the GBBC. So everyone get in your sightings. Maybe you will be that lucky person. Yes, we do have a lot of great audience questions, a lot of other questions we can get to, which we will dig into at the end and talk some more specifics about the GBBC. But right now, I am so excited to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Julia Zarankin, who is here to talk about the joy of birds and how birding encourages us to see the world with more wonder. Julia is a writer, lecturer, birder, and a self-proclaimed occasional bird-splainer in Toronto, Ontario. Her first book, Field Notes from an Unintentional Birder, is a Canadian bestseller. So welcome, Julia.
Hello, hello. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with all of you today. This is so exciting. I am going to share my screen really quickly. Just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, and so I'm going to be talking to you today about how birding changed my life and how it really, really made me see the world with more wonder. It made my world feel more expansive, and it actually made me live with more joy. So before I go any further, I want to share 2 really important quotations with you. These quotes are important to me as a birder and as a person. And, when I first started birding, I wasn't quite sure what kind of birder I wanted to be or what it meant to really bird correctly. And I got kind of anxious about it. And then I read this amazing book by Simon Barnes, who's a wonderful writer from the UK, and his book is called How to Be a Bad Bird Watcher. And this book really, it gave me permission. Well, first of all, it gave me permission to make mistakes. And it also just gave me permission to bird however I wanted. It really showed me that there is no right way to be a birder. And what Simon Barnes says is that bird watching is a state of being and not an activity. It is about life and it is about living. It is the habit of looking. And I think this idea of developing a habit of looking is actually really healthy for us and really, really important. And I think when we develop a habit of looking, we become more present, we become more attentive, and I think we also become more empathetic people. The other quote I want to share with you is by the wonderful writer and bird cartoonist and science communicator, Rosemary Moscow. And she wrote this phenomenal book called The Birding Dictionary. It's hilarious and also so true and wise. And here is her definition of a birder. A birder is a person who engages in the hobby of spotting, listening to, and or otherwise perceiving birds. If you love observing birds, you're a birder. If you're new to the hobby, you're a birder. If you love birds but have never heard of any of the slang or scientific jargon before, you're a birder. And if you're the type of person who judges other birders for not knowing enough about birds, you're still a birder, but you're also an ass. So that's Rosemary Moscow's definition of what a birder is. And basically, I just want to reiterate that everybody is a birder. If you are looking up and paying attention at birds, if you're paying attention to birds, if you are curious about what you see, if you care about your feathered friends, you are a birder. So please feel absolutely welcome. And it's not about being a certain kind of birder. It's not about whether you twitch and chase something or whether you just like to watch your backyard bird feeder. As long as you're paying attention to birds, you are a birder. So my path to birding is a bit unorthodox. I'll be honest with you. I am a very late bloomer. I saw my first bird at the age of 35. And I was so mesmerized by what I saw. And I was so shocked at the fact that I had never noticed birds before, that it really changed the way I live my life. When I saw my first red-winged blackbird, it kind of cracked my world open. And when I realized that red-winged blackbirds are common birds and not some kind of weird rarities from Peru, it really made me stop and think about what else have I been missing in my life because I never stopped to look. So I wrote this book, a memoir called Field Notes from an Unintentional Birder. And the book is basically a story of my profound conversion to birding. So I found birds when I was going through a bit of a midlife crisis. I was going through a career transition in my mid-30s. And I started auditioning all sorts of hobbies because I wanted to find something that would help me feel more present and that would exercise my patience and help me live more joyfully. And I wanted to do all of that without ever once having to get into downward dog position in a yoga class. So, I was searching for something. And ultimately, I found birds. So my book tells the story of how I, of my personal transformation from total nature novice. I mean, this is me at age 5. I go to a lot of talks by birders about how they became birders and how how their lives were changed by birds. And a lot of people begin their talks with a cute little photo of them as a child with binoculars. Well, I wasn't that child. I grew up completely indoors. I was born in the former Soviet Union, came to Canada when I was about 4.5, and I was born in Ukraine. My parents are concert pianists. So here is their perfect little child. This is exactly what my mother wanted. This is how I grew up. I grew up completely indoors. My parents took me to concert halls, the opera, the theater, museums, but we did not do nature at all. In fact, my mother always said, we didn't immigrate to this country in order to vacation in a tent. So the outdoors were for other people. And my book really tells the story of how I transformed from this kind of nature novice into a somewhat obsessive bird nerd. So here's a picture of me taken a couple of years ago during a Christmas bird count that I did in the pouring rain for about 6 hours straight. And when I came home, my husband said, "So how was it?" It was probably awful. And I smiled and I said, it was the best day of my life, because that is literally how birds make me feel. They make me feel so happy. They make me feel exhilarated. They make me feel like my world is expanding. And honestly, nothing could be better. So it all started for me with a red-winged blackbird. There's an expression that birders often use called my spark bird. And that is the bird you see that ignites a passion for birding. The bird you see that kind of hooks you in and makes you want to see more and more birds. For me, that was the red-winged blackbird. I saw it on one of my very first birding outings. And I was a complete novice. I didn't even own a pair of binoculars. I found a bird group online and we went out. And my first bird outing, this was in Toronto in April, we were looking at ducks. And this was my first time ever birding. And every single duck looked exactly the same. And after about 2 hours of this, I started planning my exit speech, and I was about to tell the group, sorry guys, this just isn't working out for me. And then on our way back to the cars, suddenly a red-winged blackbird popped up in the cattails and, started belting out its song, started singing conqueree. And I just looked at this bird and I was mesmerized. And I turned to my bird group and I said, oh my God, what is this creature? Is this a rare migrant from Peru? And they said, no. Oh my God, you weren't kidding when you said you were a beginner. It turns out that this is one of the most common springtime birds in Toronto. And this really made me stop and think, oh my God, what else have I been missing? Because I've never, ever taken the time to look. And initially, I was actually a little bit upset that my spark bird turned out to be something as common as the red-winged blackbird. I mean, I thought, if it's really a spark bird, shouldn't it be something extravagant and rare? But actually, I think in a way it's kind of perfect that the bird that got me hooked is one of our most common species. It's something that is around me and that accompanies me almost every day, at least, during spring, summer, and fall. And all I have to do is take the time to look. And there's this magical creature and this thing of wonder right next to me. And what I really love about the Great Backyard Bird Count is that it's also a wonderful celebration of our common birds. So I'm tuning in from Toronto, Canada. Toronto it's a huge city. It's an enormous urban metropolis. And usually when people think of Toronto, they don't really think of natural spaces. And before I started birding, I really thought that in order to see nature, in order to spend time in nature, I had to, hop on a plane and go to Switzerland and go hiking in the Swiss Alps. I didn't realize that there is so much nature all around us if only we take the time to look. So birding really, really helped me see the extraordinary in the ordinary. And this is a photo of the Toronto skyline taken from my favorite place in the city, which is this huge park. It's an urban wilderness. It's called Tommy Thompson Park. That's kind of my patch. That's where I go most often. And I love this vantage point on the city because it really it puts nature front and center. So, you know, that birds really helped me see my hometown in a completely different way. Instead of thinking of Toronto as this traffic-filled city, this kind of concrete jungle, birds helped me transform it into the city that is actually a network of interconnected wildernesses. So birds really transformed the place I live and made me fall in love with my city in a completely different way. What I love most about birding is just that it brings me so much joy. And almost every photo that is taken of me birding or interacting with birds is a photo of me with an absolutely ridiculous grin on my face, because that's just how happy birds make me. These photos were taken at a migration monitoring station where I volunteered for several years in downtown Toronto. And we were trained and taught how to hold birds. So all of this was done under supervision as well. But here I am holding a black and white warbler, and to the right, I am holding a bufflehead. So birds really bring me joy. They also calm me down. And there's actually a lot of scientific studies being done right now that investigate the connection between joy and bird watching and seeing a greater diversity of birds. And you know, it has now been scientifically proven that watching birds and seeing a greater diversity of birds makes us demonstrably happier. And what I really, really love about birds and birding is that they take me outside of my own head, right? When I go out to look at birds, especially when I go out to look at birds in the winter, you know, I'm in a different place, and I start to realize that the world is bigger than just my little petty problems. And I think it's really, really healthy to have an activity that reminds us that we are part of something greater than just, you know, what's happening in our office or at our computer or, you know, in our homes. And the fact that birds take us outside, that they clear our head, I think is really, really important for our mental health, and it certainly does bring a lot of joy. And sometimes, you know, people are surprised when they learn that actually birding is an all-season sport. And I do feel like winter is a particularly exciting time to go out and bird. First of all, it makes you feel like a superhero and it gets you off the couch. And even though our instinct in the winter is perhaps to hibernate, birding forces us outside, and it is so, so good for our mental health. Lately, I've also been co-leading bird walks for beginners. And let me tell you that there is absolutely nothing greater than, you know, sort of experiencing, getting to see birds with a group of people and getting to experience the sense of communal joy that comes with seeing something absolutely exciting. And so that's also another reason why I'm so excited to be talking to you in conjunction with the Great Backyard Bird Count. Because first of all, the Great Backyard Bird Count gets us outside in the winter, and it also encourages us to think of this as a global event. Yes, we're all in different parts of the world, but we are looking at birds together at the same time. And I really think that you can feel that kind of sense of communal communal joy. And we're also contributing to science and contributing to conservation. And of course, I talk a lot about how we need birds for our mental health and that they make us feel better. And birds also need us a whole lot right now to sort of fight on their behalf and to ensure that their habitats are preserved. Another thing I really, really love about the Great Backyard Bird Count is that it is a celebration of common birds. And here I am feeding a chickadee, a black-capped chickadee. And what I realized is that there is no such thing as just a chickadee. I used to take these common birds for granted because I always wanted to see something rare and extravagant. But really, when you think about it, there is nothing cooler than a black-capped chickadee. I mean, look at this feisty little bird that is around, it hangs out around Toronto year-round, even when the temperatures dip to like -25. The chickadees are still out there singing up a storm. And chickadees are also amazing because it's one of the only birds whose brains actually grow in the winter. The chickadee's brain enlarges by 30% every fall and winter because chickadees love to cache food and then they remember each one of their caches, and that's how they actually survive the winter. So I think birds have extraordinary superpowers, and the more we get to know them, the more magical these common birds become. Here's another common bird for me. This is the hooded merganser. You see quite a few of them in Toronto. And this is an absolutely stunning duck. I mean, look at that gravity-defying crest. It is absolutely, absolutely glorious. And this crest actually acts as a flirtation device. I mean, the snazzier the crest, the more the cooler, the more the duck knows how to maneuver it, the more attractive he is to a female. So just learning all of these things makes these common birds come alive. And look at this hooded merganser's pointy bill. That bill is actually serrated and it can slice through fish better than any kind of sashimi knife that you've ever used. Another common bird that I absolutely adore and that just makes me feel so much joy is the blue jay. Look at all that. Look at that symphony of different blues that we see in its plumage. And what's amazing to me is that those blue jay feathers are structurally blue. They're not actually blue. They're actually brown. But what makes us humans perceive them as blue is the way the light scatters in the feather. And so the blueness is actually an optical illusion. So how is that for some sci-fi magic in the bird world? Another common bird that I absolutely adore is the white-breasted nuthatch. Here I am holding a nuthatch on the left side, and on the right-hand side, you see Bob Bell's absolutely beautiful photo of this white-breasted nuthatch. And what I love about these birds is that even though I can pretty much guarantee that the white-breasted nuthatch has never taken a yoga class, but in spite of that, they can do the meanest, coolest yogic cobra position that I have ever seen. So I've taken a number of classes, and trust me, my cobra does not look like the white-breasted nuthatches. And this bird is absolutely amazing, and it can also creep down trees vertically, and it can hang upside down. And I only wish I were as agile and nimble as this bird. And what I also love about birding is the surprises and this feeling of magic. A few years ago, I went birding in my patch at Tommy Thompson Park in downtown Toronto, and here is the sight that I came upon, this gorgeous, regal, snowy owl just sitting there being completely wildly photogenic and beautiful. And so there is magic all around us if we only take the time to look. And this is one of my last favorite common birds, the dark-eyed junco. I used to take these birds for granted. I never really even paid attention to them. But look at this beauty with its cute little tiny pink bill. And dark-eyed juncos are sometimes called snowbirds. And basically, you know that winter is coming when the first dark-eyed junco arrives. And what's amazing about dark-eyed juncos is just the variation of their plumages. There are close to 15 different subspecies. So no matter where you are in North America, you can see a dark-eyed junco, but it will probably look quite different and have sort of a different coloring. So that to me is also deeply incredible. And so, I'm winding down the presentation here. I'm just going to end with some warnings. Now that I've told you about how extraordinary birds are and how they've changed my life and made me feel more expansive, more joyful, more present, the warning is that you too might succumb to birder derangement syndrome. And I borrow this self-diagnosis from the wonderful science writer who I deeply admire, Ed Yong. He wrote an amazing piece in the New York Times about his transformation into a birder and how he started succumbing to birder derangement syndrome. So basically what starts to happen to you is your calendar gets rearranged. Instead of looking forward to Christmas and Hanukkah and what have you, you start living for spring migration. May becomes the most important month of your existence. Another thing that can happen to you as you succumb to birder derangement syndrome is suddenly you develop an unreasonable fondness for sewage lagoons and garbage dumps and mud flats. Suddenly, you start to set your alarm for 4 a.m. and this seems completely normal to you. Suddenly, you start making all of these birdie jokes and you start enjoying bird puns and all your relatives just kind of wait for you to be quiet. Anyway, just don't say that I didn't warn you. Suddenly, you develop all sorts of questionable sartorial wardrobe choices. Suddenly you can't wait to buy that multi-pocketed vest. And suddenly you notice that you are tucking your pants into your socks and wearing an enormous Tilly hat. And that is definitely part of birder derangement syndrome. And of course, your geography gets recalibrated. Maybe your family or your partner or your friends will want you to go on a Caribbean vacation with them or something. And you'll say, no, I need to go visit the nearest sewage lagoon, or I need to go see the mud flats. So, don't say that I didn't warn you. All of this can happen to you too. And I'm going to end this presentation with this final slide. This slide is by a graffiti artist in Toronto. I don't know who this person is, but they run around the city writing, "Tout est possible." Everything is possible. And honestly, that's how birding makes me feel. Birding makes me feel hopeful. It makes me feel like I am part of a community. I am part of something larger. It makes me feel more present. And it makes me see beauty and wonder in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you for that great talk. All right, so we are just going to spend the remainder of our time taking your questions. So we will talk through both questions that were pre-submitted through registration and then also those shared during the webinar. I would also like to welcome back Becca and Olivia to join us. So I'll just start grabbing questions and throwing them at each of our presenters. So let's see. I saw this question come up quite a few times for Julia, actually, which is if you could just tell everyone your plans for what might be next for you. So specifically, if you are maybe thinking about writing any other books or have any other plans on the horizon.
Thank you so much for asking that question. What's funny is that when my memoir was published, I really thought, okay, I'm done with birds. I've said everything I need to say. I mean, what else can I possibly have to say about birds? And little did I know that it was only the beginning. So I have a bunch of articles coming out. I've been, writing a lot of journalism about birds. So I have a piece coming out in Orion in a couple months. I just had a piece published in Sierra, and I have something else coming out in Ontario Nature. And yes, I do have another book in the works, but I'm a little bit superstitious, so I don't want to. I'm not going to talk in any detail about that. But there is stuff in the works and in the pipeline. And if you want to know more about my writing practice, please do check out my website. It's just my name .com. So yes, but thank you for asking that.
Wonderful. All right. Let's see. So I will, I'll give this next question to you, Becca, which is, can sightings be entered after the 4 days of counting? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. Yes is the answer. So we continue to accept submissions for any birds that were seen or heard during the February 13th through 16th period of time. And you can enter them later. And the only most important thing to do is just to make sure that you put the accurate location and the accurate date that those birds were seen and heard when you enter them into either Merlin or eBird. And one of the reasons we allow people to continue to enter data until March 1st is because sometimes teachers are doing this with students, and the students go home and then they bring their lists in and their teachers add them. Some people are traveling for GBBC. And maybe they're doing kind of what Olivia recommended. They're just writing down the birds that they see, and then they go ahead and enter them in when they're back. So we accept birds that are seen during those that 4-day window up until March 1st, and then the data entry will close.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so we've had a lot of questions that were submitted about bird feeders, feeding birds, or generally attracting birds maybe to your backyard or your space. So Olivia, I'll give this one to you to see if you have any advice on bird feeder setup, cleaning and maintenance, what food to use, just some basics about bird feeding and attracting birds.
For sure, yeah, and I'm going to actually take us to the Feeder Watch website just for a second, because there's so many great resources already built into that website. So you can find under the Learn section, and this is feederwatch.org. Under the Learn section, there's a whole page about feeding birds. And then there's also a great breakdown of feeder types and seed types for the birds that you might want to attract. So this page, great resource. And just in general, black-oiled sunflower seeds are going to be the best bang for your buck, attracting a wide variety of birds, everything from sparrows and finches to larger birds like woodpeckers and jays. I tend to buy that exclusively, and then also have some suet available in the colder months to help the birds stay fueled. But really, it's up to you to decide what works best for you. So like I said, there's some great info here about the types of feeders, and then also the food types to fill those feeders with. Not every type of seed works for every type of feeder, so another thing to consider. I'll go ahead and stop sharing that, but you can find that at feederwatch.org, and there's lots of Feeder Watch season left if you have fun next weekend and want to join the project. If you do decide to put out a feeder, it's really important that you keep it clean. Feeders become unsafe for birds when they are neglected. So it's recommended that you take it down and wash it with a bleach solution every 2 weeks, even more if you're in hotter climates or if you're using a nectar feeder. We really want to keep waste and debris underneath the feeders to a minimum. So rotating your feeder location, making sure you're raking underneath or getting rid of any shells that have kind of collected on the ground. That's just, more breeding area for disease and for waste and droppings. And I really only recommend that you set up what you can maintain. So for me, that's usually one hanging feeder out in the tree in my yard, and then sometimes I'll have a window feeder as well. But take into consideration that feeders either need to be right on the window to be safe for birds, or about 10 feet away from a window. They need either enough room to stop and also not be within distance to the window if they do get flushed off the feeder by a predator. So all of that information on the feederwatch.org website, but take into consideration what you can manage.
Thank you. Yeah, great tips. Okay, so here's a question for Julia, and I think actually your presentation did like a wonderful job of talking about this, but I was wondering if you had anything else to say to this question, which is just about like how you keep the joy and the excitement around like a bird species that you might see like all the time. How do you keep up that joy? So I know you had some great examples in your talk, but if you have anything else to tell our audience about that.
Oh, thanks for that question. That's a really great question. When I first started birding, my goal was just to be able to see and identify the bird. I thought, okay, that's it, right? Like, what more could you possibly want? But the thing about birds is that the more you see, the more you want to see, and the more you learn, the more you want to learn. And I think what keeps common species fresh for me and very exciting is by like learning about their behaviors and learning about, okay, what kind of trees do they like to hang out in? What do they, how do they bring food to their babies? What does their courtship look like? Basically watching their behaviors. And the thing about birds is that they are so weird and wacky and wonderful that there is always something to be surprised by. Like there's this duck that I really like a lot, the northern shoveler. They have this amazing bill. It kind of looks like a shovel, honestly. And I've seen them a million times because they're always in my area in the fall and in the spring. And then last year, suddenly I saw a group of probably 30 northern shovelers, and they were swimming around in a circle. And I had never seen that before, this kind of weird cooperative feeding that they were doing. And it was just a spectacular moment for me. And, this other time when I was in New York, birding with a friend in Brooklyn in this urban wilderness, and we came upon a Carolina wren. No, actually 2 Carolina wrens. They were making so much noise, and they were wrestling. Like, I mean, it was almost inappropriate. I couldn't believe what they were doing. My friend Heather Wolf took a video, and then we sent it to these super experienced birders we know, saying, what on earth is going on here? And, a few of these seasoned birders that I sent these videos to were like, whoa, I've never seen that. And actually, that's my favorite thing that happens when I'm on a walk with super experienced birders who I have a lot to learn from. Almost invariably, we will come upon a bird or a behavior, and the bird guide will be like, wow, I've never seen that before, or I haven't seen that in years. So there's so many surprising behaviors that are out there. We just have to watch them more closely.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Okay, we're getting close to the end of our presentation. So let's see. I'm trying to see what our most common questions are. I think we'll do this one, which I will turn over to Olivia again, which is does the GBBC work for kids? And do you have any tips about creating a great backyard bird count event in general? So if you want to talk about that quickly, then that will probably be our last question, and we will wrap up.
Sure. Yeah. So if you want to host a GBBC community event, totally reach out to local birding groups or naturalist groups. There may already be one in your area that you could support or join in, especially if you've got kids in tow. Sometimes it's easier to join an existing event. But if you do want to host your own, community groups are a great place to start. If you have an active neighborhood association or church groups, Facebook pages, library bulletins, decide where you're going to count, put your details out there, and then hope people show up is kind of the best way to go about it. But if you want to even kind of make it smaller for yourself, invite people you already know. Invite your friends and family to come birding with you and host a mini GBBC community event within your own circle. I highly recommend, since the count is over 4 days, pick a time that works for you. I'm currently in Northern Ontario and it's quite cold here. I will not be going out first thing in the morning on Friday. I'll probably make my way out around 8:30 once I know the sun is good and in the sky. I know I'll just get more enjoyment out of that. But yeah, pick a spot that's easy for everyone to get to, and then also where there's likely going to be birds to view. It's way more fun if you get to see birds. So open water, forested areas, parks with big trees, anywhere that you have a good chance of seeing birds is going to be great for your group.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so I think we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you so much to our audience with coming in with such great questions. I know we didn't get to all of the questions. There were a ton of questions beforehand and during the chat. So if we didn't get to your question, definitely check out the birdcount.org website. There are a ton of great resources on there. We do have an FAQ page. You may be able to find your answer right there. Of course, you can always contact the GBBC team, and there's a contact form on the website as well. So we are, happy to provide direct support or, answer your question there. So I also want to say thank you so much to Olivia and Becca and Julia for taking the time to talk with us today, for sharing about the joys of birding and providing, a great overview and tips about the Great Backyard Bird Count. Just letting everyone know that we will plan to send a recording of the webinar out afterwards. It'll be posted on the website. It can be, viewed later on. So if you had to leave early or didn't quite jump on early enough, you can watch the whole thing later. We'll have a recording available. To our audience, we hope you're all really excited to go out and to count some birds. Remember that the GBBC runs from Friday, February 13th through Monday, February 16th. So hopefully you're very inspired, get ready, get your birding ID skills honed. Make sure you can log into your eBird or Merlin, just get ready for a wonderful count this year. So I will wrap up here. Have a great day or night or morning, depending on where you are in the world, to everyone, and happy birding. Thank you all so much.